Story 1. Dad's horror during the night shift. My father worked as an MT subway station manager for 35 years. With this job, there must always be a manager on duty, so he worked almost every shift possible throughout his career. That means he worked quite a few night shifts. Most trains were empty throughout the night. He said that was the only fun part about working the night shift. He had a bunch of funny and strange stories about the night shift to tell, but there was one that was truly horrifying. At around 3 a.m., my father boarded an almost empty train. The cold, sterile lighting of the subway car made things even more eerie. Just as he was settling into solitude, the train stopped and a man got on. This guy is tall and thin, wearing a thick coat and a beanie hat. He glanced quickly, worriedly, at my father before sitting down in the farthest corner. My father could feel the man's eyes on him, occasionally looking up. The feeling of being watched gnawed at him. When he got to my dad's stop, he got off the bus, and to his horror, the other men got off the bus too. As he walked to the office door, he glanced back and saw the other man walking about 50 feet away. That man's presence was like a dark cloud covering him. My father quickly unlocked the door, stepped inside, and locked the door behind him, trying to shake off the feeling of fear. 5 minutes later, the silence was broken by the sound of someone trying to turn the doorknob. Then there was a soft knock on the door, almost too soft to be heard. "Who's that?" my father called, trying to keep his voice calm. "I want to talk," came the answer. The voice was calm and chilling. "Scat," my father ordered. He could sense trouble. This guy is trouble. The knocking on the door lasted for 5 agonizing minutes. Finally, my dad pulled up the security camera screen and pointed the camera toward his office door. Sure enough, it was the guy on the train looking straight at the door with terrifying intensity, as if he felt he was being watched. The man finally left. My father tried to concentrate on work, but half an hour later, he had to catch another train. He checked the camera again to make sure no one was there. After locking the door, he walked down the stairs to the station platform, his heart pounding. As soon as he got on the train, he saw the other man again, coming down the stairs and into the same train car. The man sat a few seats away, staring at my father. Desperation clawed at him. He nodded slightly and tried to smile, hoping it would ease the situation. But the man kept staring. My father never looked back after that first look, but he could feel that man's eyes burning into him. When the train stopped, my father rushed up the stairs, glancing over his shoulder. That man was following him, a restless shadow. My dad's heart skipped a beat when he saw Wendy's that was still open. He rushed inside, feeling momentarily relieved. He watched the man approach the window, staring at it with cold, empty eyes for 10 long seconds before finally turning away and disappearing into the night. Shocked, my dad waited a little longer before arriving at his third and final stop of the night. Even then, he couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. When he checked the security cameras out of paranoia, he saw the same man again, pacing back and forth right outside his office, looking up at the camera with a blank look that lasted a full minute before he left. Gone, never appeared again. late night chase. Around Christmas time, 3 of my friends and I were in New York. We finally decided to leave until about 2:00 a.m. We boarded the first train we could catch, and as expected, it was very empty. By then we were quite awake, laughing about our night until a sudden noise in the next train car caught our attention. Looking through the glass, we saw 2 hooded men standing too close to a woman screaming for help. "Guys, we need to do something," I said, and walked towards the door. But when we looked closer, we saw a metallic sheen. "Go to the next car now," I shouted. We ran through the train cars, breathing heavily, scared. I glanced back and saw one of the men pointing towards us before starting to follow. We ran, heart pounding, past at least 3 different train cars. Before the train finally stopped, we rushed through the old station, looking for shelter. I lost my friends and hid behind a trash can. Their footsteps echoed throughout the deserted station. My heart jumped into my throat as I looked through the gap at the top of the trash can. I saw them clearly now. One was black, the other was Indian, both young. "Find them quickly," one of them said. Those words startled me with fear. I almost exposed myself with a gasp, but still tried to stay hidden. Miraculously, they didn't see me. They left the area, their footsteps fading into the distance. I ran in the opposite direction and quickly found my friends, who were waving at me from behind a large pole. We hid there, shivering and listening for any sounds of the men returning. The big shock came when we saw the woman on the train, who we thought was in danger, walk towards the men and call out, "Where are they? Don't tell me you couldn't catch them." The 2 men reappeared and walked towards her. Their conversation was too quiet to hear, but it seemed like they were planning their next move. They went down the stairs to the platform, perhaps waiting for another train to set a trap again. We called the police and reported what was happening, but who knows if they would ever be caught. The memory of that night still makes me shiver. Story 3. The terrifying encounter in the tunnel. My name is Danny. I'm 22 years old, and this is the most terrifying experience of my life. I live and work in New York City, but I don't have a car, so my main means of transportation is the subway. It was a Saturday night, and I was on my way home from a party in the middle of the night. Walking down the steps into the deserted subway station is always a bit cold. This particular station is very close. As I was walking, I could almost feel eyes on me, along with the occasional echoing explosion coming from who knows where. I arrived early to board the train, so I sat on a bench and waited. Suddenly I heard a voice. "Here, friend!" It was a dirty-looking man, his head sticking out of the tunnel. He smiled, revealing a horrifying yellow smile with at least 3 missing teeth. I tried to ignore him, but he refused to leave. "Come play with us," he called. Laughter echoed from the tunnel again, and another man appeared, equally dirty and scary, giving me an unpleasant smile. "Let's go. This will be fun," the second man said, his eyes fixed on me, unblinking. I continued to do my best to ignore them, but then the first man moved into the tunnel and returned with a third face. This one expressionless and hunched over. It looks like the man is holding the other guy's face. Panic rose within me as the train finally approached. I stood up, preparing to board the train, but when I approached the edge of the platform, I almost vomited. The men were retreating into the tunnel, and the second man was holding what looked like a human. I staggered onto the train, my mind spinning. When the train started moving, I saw feet walking down the stairs to the platform, but I couldn't see who they belonged to. Then, as the train moved into the tunnel, I saw a group of men hunched over the railing, inches from the window, all staring at me with sunken eyes. I knocked on the ticket office door like a madman, shouting that it was urgent. He opened the door, and I frantically explained what I had just seen. He called the person in charge of the station, and I can only hope they will take care of it. It feels like it's been a while since I got to my stop. When I arrived, I almost jumped off the train, my legs weak with relief. Since that night, I've only been to one party at the same friend's house, but I skipped that station. It's worth the extra walk to avoid those haunting eyes and the horror they contain. Story 4. The Night Walker. It was a cold, rainy night in Chicago. The subway station at Jackson was almost deserted, the usual hustle and bustle replaced by an eerie silence. I was on my way home from a late night shift, exhausted and longing for the comfort of my bed. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting unsettling shadows on the grimy tile. As I descended the stairs, the sound of my footsteps echoed through the empty corridor. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, trying to ward off the chill that seemed to seep into my bones. The platform was deserted except for a homeless man sleeping on a bench and a young woman at the far end, her face illuminated by the pale glow of her phone. At the time, aim. The next train wasn't due for another 15 minutes. With a sigh, I leaned against a pillar and tried to relax, but a sense of unease began to creep over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Glancing around, I saw nothing unusual. The homeless man was still asleep, and the woman was engrossed in her phone. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the feeling persisted, gnawing at my head. Suddenly, a movement caught my eye. At the far end of the platform, where the darkness swallowed the light, I saw a figure standing just beyond the reach. At first, I thought it was another commuter, but something about the way they stood, motionless and shrouded in shadow, sent a chill down my spine. I squinted, trying to make out their features, but the darkness was too thick. The figure remained still, almost blending into the darkness, but I could feel their eyes on me. My heart started to race, and I glanced towards the young woman, hoping she had noticed. She was oblivious, her focus completely absorbed by her screen. I decided to move closer to her, seeking some semblance of safety and numbness. As I took a step forward, the figure moved too, stepping into the dim light. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a man with a gaunt face and hollow eyes dressed in a ragged coat. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made my blood red. "Hey!" I called out to the woman, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you see that guy?" She looked up, confused. "What guy?" I pointed towards the figure, but he retreated into the darkness. There was a man standing right there. She glanced in the direction I was pointing and then back at me, her expression skeptical. "I don't see anyone. Maybe you're just tired." I wanted to believe her, but the sense of dread gnawing at me refused to be dismissed. "Yeah, maybe," I muttered, but my eyes kept darting back to the spot where the man had stood. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. I kept my back to the wall, scanning the platform for any sign of the mysterious figure. Every creak and groan of the station made me jump. My nerves stretched to their breaking point. Finally, the distant rumble of the approaching train reached my ears. Relief washed over me as the headlights pierced through the darkness of the tunnel. I moved closer to the edge of the platform, eager to board and leave this nightmare behind. But just as the train pulled in, the figure reappeared, standing directly under one of the flickering lights. This time he was closer, and I could see his face clearly. His eyes were empty, and his smile twisted into something sinister. He raised a hand, beckoning me towards him. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The train doors opened, and I stumbled inside, my eyes never leaving the man. As the doors closed, he stepped forward, pressing his face against the glass, his eyes locked onto mine. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but the malevolence in his expression was clear. The train started to move, and I backed away from the door, my legs shaking. The figure faded into the darkness, but his image was burned into my mind. I collapsed into a seat, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I never saw that man again, but I avoided the Jackson station for months afterward. Even now, the memory of that night sends shivers down my spine. Sometimes, when I'm alone on a platform, I can still feel his eyes on me, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next train to arrive.